At dinner, my parents scoffed. "So, what's it like being the most worthless person here?" Everyone roared with laughter. I grinned and replied, "How does it feel knowing this worthless one won't be covering your bills anymore?" The second I said it, the room went silent. Can you even imagine being publicly slapped across the face by your own cousin, right outside the courthouse, while your father just stood there and watched? That brutal moment, that raw humiliation, it was meant to crush me. But what they didn't know was, just 5 minutes later, I'd be walking through those very doors, not as a victim, but to take my seat on the judge's bench. Yeah, you heard that right. My name is Shannon, and at 31, I became the youngest judge in our county's history. But trust me, my family wasn't exactly throwing a party. For most of my life, my dad barely acknowledged my existence, and my cousin, Alicia, well, she was on a mission to outshine me at every single turn. So yeah, my journey to becoming a judge was a pretty solitary one. I never, ever expected my biggest professional triumph to collide with family drama in such a public, shocking way. I grew up in this tiny Connecticut town where everyone knew everyone's business. My father, Thomas Walker, was a big deal, respected businessman, owned commercial properties, generous with community causes. That's what people saw. What they didn't see was the ice-cold wall he put up at home, especially with me. My mother, Elizabeth, she was my shield, my champion. She went to all my school events, celebrated my academic wins, always trying to bridge that massive, chilling gap between my dad's expectations and my desperate need for his approval. But then, when I was just 12, she died. A quick, brutal battle with cancer. Just like that, everything changed. Our home, which had once held even a flicker of warmth, became a frozen mausoleum of unspoken words and endless missed connections. With Mom gone, the difference in how Dad treated me versus my cousin, Alicia, became impossible to ignore. Alicia was my Aunt Patricia's daughter, only 2 years older than me, and she practically lived at our house. She'd somehow carved out this special place in my father's heart, a place I just could never reach. "Shannon, why can't you be more like your cousin?" That became the constant, agonizing soundtrack of my teenage years. Alicia was the outgoing, charismatic one, always with a quick joke that made Dad laugh. Me? I was more reserved, lost in books, not parties. What Dad never seemed to notice was that while Alicia had charm, her grades were, well, let's just say mediocre. Meanwhile, I was pulling off a perfect GPA, joining every academic club I could find. I remember my 8th grade science project. It won the state competition, even getting a feature in the local newspaper. Dad barely even glanced at the article. But 2 weeks later, when Alicia made the junior varsity cheerleading squad, he took the entire family out to the nicest restaurant in town to celebrate. "Your cousin knows how to be a team player," he told me that night, like that explained everything. That'll take her further in life than any science award. It was a punch to the gut. As we got older, Alicia's jealousy just festered. It was palpable. She'd make these really cutting remarks about my boring academic focus. One time, she deliberately spilled soda all over my study notes the night before a huge exam. Another time, she told a boy I liked that I'd said terrible things about him, which was a complete lie. These small, constant cruelties just piled up. And my father? He never, ever intervened. But the most painful incident happened in high school. We had to write an original short story for English Lit. I poured my heart into mine for weeks, crafting a tale about a girl finding her voice after losing her mother. Somehow, Alicia got onto my computer, found my draft. She copied huge chunks of it, tweaked them a little, and then submitted it as her own 2 days before the deadline. When I found out, I was devastated. I confronted her privately first. "What does it matter?" she shrugged. "You always get good grades anyway." I needed this win. I ended up going to our teacher with both versions, explaining everything. Given our academic histories, the teacher believed me. Alicia got a failing grade, and that's when the real family drama erupted. My aunt called my father, absolutely furious that I had humiliated her daughter. Instead of defending me, Dad grounded me. "Family comes first, Shannon," he lectured. "You could have just written another story." That night, I cried myself to sleep, feeling utterly, completely alone. The next morning, I went to school early, just wandering aimlessly, and somehow ended up in the career counselor's office. Mrs. Taylor saw my red eyes and just invited me to sit down. We talked for over an hour. It was the first time I ever admitted out loud that I wanted to become a lawyer. "I want to fight for what's right," I told her. "I want to be in a place where the truth actually matters." Mrs. Taylor connected me with a local attorney, Janet Reeves, who agreed to let me shadow her. Judge Reeves became my first real mentor. She showed me that women could absolutely succeed in the legal field through intelligence, integrity, and sheer determination. More importantly, she helped me understand that I didn't need my father's approval to chase my dreams. When I told Dad about my plan to study pre-law in college, he dismissed it immediately. "Lawyers are a dime a dozen, Shannon. That's unrealistic dreaming. You should focus on something practical, like business administration. You could work for me someday." His words stung deeply. But they also ignited a fire in me, strengthening my resolve. I applied to colleges with top pre-law programs, secured scholarships and financial aid, and prepared to leave home behind. College was both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because I was finally free from my father's disapproving glances and Alicia's constant undermining. Terrifying because I was entirely on my own financially. While many of my classmates had their parents' support, I juggled 3 part-time jobs alongside a full course load. I was a library assistant in the mornings, waited tables in the evenings and weekends, and tutored whenever I could squeeze it in. Sleep? That became a luxury. But I was absolutely determined to succeed without ever asking my father for help. Despite the insane schedule, I maintained a 3.9 GPA and landed an internship at the district attorney's office my junior year. I called home to share the news, my heart thumping with a sliver of hope. Dad sounded completely distracted. "That's nice, Shannon. Did you hear Alicia got promoted at the mall? She's an assistant manager now." Every conversation followed the same agonizing pattern, my achievements minimized, Alicia's ordinary life developments celebrated. Over time, I called home less and less. My father rarely called me. Meanwhile, Alicia had dropped out of community college after 1 semester, claiming it wasn't for her. But this didn't affect her standing in the family at all. My aunt and father kept praising her street smarts and people skills, showering her with both emotional and financial support. When Alicia needed a car, Dad co-signed her loan. When I needed new winter boots because mine had holes in them, he suggested I budget better. The contrast was gut-wrenching, but it pushed me to build my own support network. I made incredibly close friendships with classmates who shared my ambitions and values. Most importantly, I met Julia during my senior year. We were debate partners in a constitutional law seminar. She was brilliant, funny, and fiercely loyal. She became the sister I never had. Julia was the first person I told when I got acceptance letters from 3 law schools, one with a substantial scholarship. She celebrated with me, buying champagne with money she probably didn't even have. When I called Dad with the news, he sounded almost annoyed. "Law school? That's at least 3 more years of not earning a real income, Shannon. Are you sure about this?" I sent letters home occasionally during my first year of law school, sharing stories about my classes and professors. Most went unanswered. The few replies I did get were brief and impersonal, always including updates about Alicia that I hadn't asked for. During winter break of my second year, I decided to go home for Christmas. Just hoping that time and distance might have softened the family dynamics. "Don't expect too much," Julia warned me. "People don't change overnight." She was right. The holiday gathering at my aunt's house was a disaster. Alicia, now 25 and working as a salon receptionist, completely dominated the conversation with exaggerated stories about celebrity clients. When relatives asked about my studies, Alicia quickly jumped in with some dramatic tale about a customer who'd supposedly left her a $100 tip. Later that evening, I overheard her talking to our cousin William in the kitchen. "Shannon thinks she's so special with her fancy law school," she sneered. "But did you know she had to take out massive loans? She'll be in debt forever. Plus, I heard she's barely passing her classes." Neither statement was true. My scholarship covered most of my tuition, and I was in the top 10% of my class. When I confronted Alicia, she just laughed it off as just a joke. But the damage was done. William looked at me differently for the rest of the night. The final straw came when my father pulled me aside before I left. "Alicia mentioned you've been struggling in school," he said. "You know, there's no shame in coming home and taking a more practical path." I was stunned. "Dad, I'm not struggling. I am excelling." "Why would you believe her without even asking me?" He just shrugged. "Alicia's always been straightforward. You tend to exaggerate your accomplishments." I left that house that night and checked into a hotel. The next morning, I drove back to campus 2 days earlier than planned. On that long, silent drive, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I would create distance from the people who couldn't celebrate my success. I would build my own path. During my final year of law school, I focused entirely on my future. I joined the law review, competed in moot court, and secured a prestigious clerkship for after graduation. When professors and colleagues started recognizing my potential as a rising legal talent, I didn't call home to share the news. The gap between my family and me had grown too wide to bridge with phone calls. I graduated with honors, and Julia was there, cheering loudly as I walked across the stage. My father and Alicia? Noticeably absent, despite receiving invitations. That night, celebrating with Julia and my new friends, I realized something profound. I had created a new family, one built on mutual respect and genuine support. My early career as a public defender was challenging but deeply fulfilling. I represented clients who couldn't afford legal counsel, often facing overwhelming odds in a system that seemed designed to crush them. The hours were long, the pay was modest, and the emotional toll was significant. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Within 2 years, I'd built a reputation for thorough preparation, ethical conduct, and genuine concern for my clients. Judges noticed my work ethic. Prosecutors respected my legal arguments, even when they disagreed. Senior attorneys in the public defender office started assigning me more complex cases. One of those cases brought me to the courtroom of Judge Eleanor Thompson, a formidable presence on the bench, known for her sharp intellect and zero patience for unprepared attorneys. After watching me successfully argue a difficult motion to suppress evidence, she asked me to stay after the hearing. "You have potential, counselor," she said, studying me over her reading glasses. "Have you ever considered aiming for the bench someday?" The question caught me completely off guard. The bench? You mean, becoming a judge? Yes, that is generally what the bench refers to in legal circles, she replied with dry humor. It's never too early to consider your long-term trajectory. This county needs more judges who understand what it's like to represent the disadvantaged. That conversation planted a seed in my mind. Judge Thompson became another incredible mentor, inviting me to lunch, discussing legal theories and career strategies. Under her guidance, I started taking on cases that broadened my experience and raised my profile in the legal community. One such case involved defending a young woman accused of theft by her employer, a prominent local business owner. Through careful investigation, I uncovered evidence that the employer had actually framed my client to cover up his own financial misdeeds. The case made local headlines when the charges against my client were dismissed, and the investigation turned toward her former boss. News of my professional successes eventually trickled back to my hometown through mutual acquaintances and local media. I heard from a former high school teacher that Alicia had become increasingly resentful as she learned about my career. While I was building a reputation in the legal community, Alicia had cycled through several jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. After 5 years of minimal contact, I decided to attempt reconnecting with my father. Time and distance had dulled the sharp edges of our relationship, and part of me just hoped that my professional accomplishments might finally earn his respect. I called and suggested dinner during an upcoming visit to Connecticut for a legal conference. The restaurant was upscale, and the conversation was awkward. Dad looked older than his 58 years, new lines etched around his eyes and mouth. We exchanged stilted pleasantries about the weather and my flight before he inevitably steered the conversation to Alicia. "Your cousin has been going through a rough patch," he said, swirling his scotch. "Lost another job last month. Not her fault, of course. The manager had it out for her from day one." I nodded politely, having heard variations of this excuse my entire life. "That's unfortunate. What are her plans now?" My father sighed. "She's had some legal troubles, too. Nothing serious. A couple of DUIs, a misunderstanding about some merchandise at her last retail job." Translation: Alicia had been caught stealing from her employer. The familiar pattern of excuses and minimization was exactly as I remembered it. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "If she needs legal advice, I could recommend some good attorneys in the area." My father's expression hardened. "We don't need your charity, Shannon. Alicia will figure things out. She always does." The dinner ended shortly after that. It was clear then that some relationships just can't be repaired with time alone. We had become strangers, connected only by shared DNA and a truly painful history. A year later, I was shortlisted for a judicial appointment. At 30, I would be among the youngest judges in the state if selected. The vetting process was rigorous: interviews, background checks, evaluations from peers. 2 weeks before the final decision, the committee received an anonymous complaint questioning my character and fitness for the position. The letter alleged that I had engaged in unethical behavior during my time as a public defender, claiming I had manipulated evidence in several cases. The accusations were completely false and suspiciously detailed about my personal life in ways that screamed the author knew me. Though the complaint was anonymous, I had little doubt about its source. The timing, the personal details, the blatant attempt to undermine my professional reputation, it all pointed straight to Alicia. Fortunately, my record spoke for itself. Colleagues and even former opponents from the prosecutor's office came forward to vouch for my integrity. Judge Thompson wrote a powerful letter of support detailing specific instances where I had demonstrated exceptional ethical judgment. The committee investigated the claims thoroughly and found them to be completely without merit. I was appointed to the bench despite the desperate attempt to derail my candidacy. The experience left me shaken but more determined than ever to serve with the integrity and fairness that had defined my career so far. The official announcement of my judicial appointment came on a crisp autumn morning. At 31, I became the youngest judge in our county's history. The local newspaper ran a front-page story: rising legal star Shannon Walker appointed to county court. The article detailed my education, my work as a public defender, and included quotes from senior members of the legal community praising my appointment. Judge Thompson was the first to congratulate me, stopping by my office with a small gift, a fountain pen engraved with my initials. "This was given to me when I took the bench 30 years ago," she said. "Now it's yours. Use it to sign orders that uphold justice." The courthouse staff organized a small celebration. Colleagues from both sides of the aisle, prosecutors I had faced in court and fellow public defenders, gathered to offer congratulations. The chief judge welcomed me to the family, as he called it. Family. The word triggered a bittersweet pang. This achievement should have been a moment of shared pride with those who had known me longest. Instead, the people who had witnessed my childhood were absent from this milestone. Julia, who had driven 3 hours to surprise me at the celebration, noticed my momentary melancholy. "They're missing out, not you," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "We're your family now." She was right, of course. But there's something about a parent's approval that even the most self-assured adult still craves on some deep level. I had built a life I was proud of, surrounded by people who valued me. Yet, a small part of me still wished my father could see who I had become. 2 days later, my phone rang with a Connecticut area code. I immediately recognized my father. After nearly a year of silence, for a fleeting moment, I thought maybe he'd seen the news. Maybe finally he was calling to acknowledge my success. "Shannon, we need to talk," he said without preamble. His voice sounded strained, almost desperate. "Is everything okay, Dad? Are you ill?" My concern instantly overrode our complicated history. "No, nothing like that. It's Alicia. She's in trouble. Serious trouble this time." Of course. He wasn't calling about me at all. He was calling because Alicia needed something. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my voice cooling several degrees. "Legal trouble. Fraud charges, identity theft. They're saying she could face serious time. She needs a good lawyer, Shannon. Someone who knows the system." The irony was almost too much to bear. After years of dismissing my legal career as an impractical choice, my father was now hoping to leverage it for Alicia's benefit. "Dad, I'm a judge now. I can't represent Alicia or recommend specific attorneys for her case. It would be an ethical violation." Silence stretched between us, followed by a bitter laugh from him. "A judge? Since when?" The question confirmed it. He hadn't even bothered to search my name online in years. He had no idea about my appointment, which had been covered by legal publications and local news. "Since last week," I replied evenly. "It was in the news." Another long pause. "Well, congratulations," he said finally. The words hollow and perfunctory. "But that doesn't help Alicia's situation. Surely you can make some calls, pull some strings." "That's not how this works, Dad. I have ethical obligations now that limit what I can do in situations involving family members. The most I can suggest is that Alicia contact the public defender's office if she can't afford private counsel." "So that's it? You're abandoning your family when we need you, after everything we've done for you?" The accusation was so outrageous that I almost laughed. What exactly had they done for me, besides undermine and dismiss me at every turn? "I'm sorry you see it that way, Dad. I truly am, but I can't compromise my professional ethics, even for family." He hung up without saying goodbye. Later that evening, I received a call from a colleague in the prosecutor's office, Lisa Goldstein. We had faced each other in court many times and had developed a respectful, professional relationship. Her call was unusual, especially after hours. "Shannon, I'm sorry to bother you at home, but I thought you should know. We filed charges today against an Alicia Walker for fraud and identity theft. Given your last name, I wondered if there might be a relation." "She's my cousin," I admitted, a knot forming in my stomach, but I haven't had much contact with her in years. "I see. Well, this is awkward, but part of the case involves her apparently using someone else's personal information to open credit accounts. The victim's name is Shannon Walker." My blood ran cold. "She used my identity." "It appears so. The accounts were opened several years ago using an old address of yours from college. The fraud was only discovered recently when the credit card companies began collection actions." The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. Years ago, I'd received strange calls from debt collectors about accounts I never opened. I had dismissed them as mistaken identity or scams. Now I understood what had really happened. "Her arraignment is scheduled for next Tuesday in county court," Lisa continued. "Given the personal connection, I wanted to give you a heads up so you can make sure you're not assigned to the case." "Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate the courtesy." After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. Alicia had not only tried to sabotage my career with false accusations, but had actually stolen my identity years earlier. The depth of her resentment was even greater than I had imagined. I was faced with a difficult decision. As a family member of the victim myself, I should attend the arraignment to make a statement to the court. As a newly appointed judge, I needed to maintain professional distance from cases with personal connections. And as someone who had spent years trying to break free from toxic family dynamics, I questioned whether I should involve myself at all. After a sleepless night, I decided to attend Alicia's arraignment, not as a judge, but as a family member. Despite everything, she was still my cousin. And maybe, just maybe, seeing her face consequences for her actions would be the first step toward her taking responsibility for her choices. I also hoped that being present might open a door to reconciliation with my father, who would surely be there to support Alicia. Little did I know that my decision would lead to one of the most humiliating and ultimately transformative moments of my life. Tuesday morning arrived with that perfect kind of autumn weather that normally lifts your spirits: crisp air, golden sunshine, leaves blazing in brilliant reds and oranges. But my stomach was turning. I stood in front of my closet longer than usual, deliberating what to wear. I wasn't appearing as a judge today, but I wasn't exactly a regular civilian either. I settled on a conservative navy blue dress with a tailored jacket, professional, but not overtly judicial. The drive to the courthouse was familiar, but that pit in my stomach was not. I had faced countless difficult situations in that building: tense negotiations, emotional witnesses, hostile opposing counsel. But nothing had prepared me for the prospect of seeing my father and Alicia together, especially under these circumstances. I arrived early, partly from habit, partly to compose myself. As I pulled into the judicial parking area, a security officer approached my car. "Good morning, Judge Walker," he said with a respectful nod. "I thought you weren't on the docket today." "I'm not here in an official capacity, Marcus. Personal matter." His eyes widened slightly, but he was too professional to ask questions. "Understood, Your Honor. Will you be entering through the judicial entrance?" I shook my head. "No, I'll use the main entrance today." "Thank you." Walking around to the public side of the courthouse, I spotted my father standing near the bottom of the steps, checking his watch impatiently. He looked older than he had at our dinner a year ago, shoulders slightly stooped, hair now completely gray. For a moment, watching him unobserved, I felt a ping of something like pity. He glanced up and saw me approaching. His expression cycled rapidly through surprise, confusion, and then a deep weariness. "Shannon, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Dad," I said, stopping a few feet away from him. "I'm here for Alicia's arraignment." His eyes narrowed. "Why? To gloat? To make sure they throw the book at her?" His accusation stung, but I kept my voice level. "No, Dad. Despite everything, she's family, and I thought you might need support, too." He seemed genuinely taken aback by this, unable to reconcile my presence with his perception of me as someone who had abandoned family obligations. Before he could respond, a car pulled up sharply to the curb. Alicia emerged from the passenger side, Aunt Patricia from the driver's seat. Alicia looked terrible. Her normally perfectly styled hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark roots showing through the blonde dye. Her face was puffy, her eyes bloodshot. She wore a black pantsuit that hung loosely on her frame, suggesting recent weight loss. For a moment, I felt a flicker of genuine sympathy for her. That feeling evaporated the instant she spotted me. "What the hell is she doing here?" Alicia demanded, stalking toward us. Her voice was loud enough to attract attention from others entering the courthouse. "Alicia, calm down," my aunt hissed, hurrying after her. "We're at a courthouse." "I don't care." "She has no right to be here." Alicia stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell the stale coffee on her breath. "Come to watch the show, Shannon? Enjoying seeing me at my lowest?" "That's not why I'm here," I said quietly. "I came to support Dad, and to see if there's any way I can help. Help? Alicia let out a harsh, brittle laugh. That's rich. You're the reason I'm in this mess. My father stepped between us. Alicia, this isn't the place. Let's go inside and meet with your lawyer. No! Alicia pushed past him. She needs to hear this. You think you're so perfect, don't you, Shannon? Little Miss Perfect with her perfect grades and her perfect job and her perfect life. You've always had everything handed to you. The sheer absurdity of her statement left me momentarily speechless. Everything handed to me? I had worked multiple jobs to put myself through school while she had dropped out of community college and still received my father's financial support. Alicia, I know you're upset, but that's not true. I've worked hard for everything I've achieved. Worked hard? Her voice rose to a near shriek. You sabotaged me. You told the DA about those accounts, didn't you? You've been waiting for a chance to ruin me. I didn't know about the fraud until last week, I said, struggling to maintain my composure. I had no idea you had used my identity. This admission seemed to push her over the edge. Liar, she screamed. Then, before anyone could react, she slapped me hard across the face. The blow was shocking. More than just painful. The crack of it echoed, sharp and brutal, through the morning air like a gunshot. People around us froze. My cheek burned, and I tasted blood where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. Before I could recover, Alicia grabbed the collar of my jacket with both hands, momentarily choking me as she pulled me closer to her contorted face. You filthy animal, she spat, her voice low and venomous. Now you're a disgrace to this family. You think that robe makes you better than us? You're nothing. 2 courthouse security officers were running toward us now. My father stood frozen, watching the entire scene unfold without making any move to intervene. My aunt was pulling ineffectually at Alicia's arm, pleading with her to stop. The security officers separated us, one gently moving me back while the other restrained Alicia. Is everyone all right? The first officer asked, looking at me with genuine concern. I recognized him as Officer Ramirez, who regularly worked in my courtroom. I'm fine, I said, straightening my jacket with shaking hands. Judge Walker, do you want to press charges? He asked quietly. Alicia's eyes widened at the word judge, and she looked at me with new understanding and pure horror. No charges, I said firmly, but I would appreciate an escort inside. Officer Ramirez nodded and began leading me up the steps. As we walked away, I heard Alicia burst into tears behind me. My father still hadn't said a word in my defense. Inside the building, Officer Ramirez directed me to a small conference room off the main hallway. Take a minute to compose yourself, Judge. Can I get you some water or coffee? Water would be great. Thank you. When he left, I finally allowed myself to feel the full impact of what had just happened. My hands trembled as I touched my stinging cheek. Tears welled in my eyes, not from physical pain, but from the public humiliation and the agonizing confirmation that my father would always choose Alicia over me, even when she was so clearly in the wrong. I had harbored a small, foolish hope that attending today might lead to some form of reconciliation. Instead, it had only reinforced what I had known for years but refused to fully accept: there was no relationship to salvage. In the quiet of that conference room, surrounded by the very trappings of the legal system I had dedicated my life to, I finally let go of the fantasy that my family would ever see me clearly or value me appropriately. The realization was both devastating and strangely liberating. I don't know how long I sat there trying to compose myself. The shock of the public confrontation had left me disoriented, my thoughts fragmented. I kept replaying the moment of Alicia's attack, the venom in her voice when she called me a filthy animal, and most painfully, my father's silent complicity. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Lisa Goldstein, the prosecutor I'd spoken with about Alicia's case, poked her head in. Shannon, are you okay? I heard there was an incident outside. I managed a weak smile. News travels fast in a courthouse. Gossip moves at the speed of light. She sat down across from me, her expression concerned. Security reported what happened. Are you sure you don't want to file charges? I'm sure. It would only escalate the situation. Lisa nodded, then checked her watch with a frown. Have you seen Kevin Morgan around? He's supposed to be handling arraignments in courtroom C today. No, I haven't seen him. Is there a problem? She sighed. Judge Reeves was rushed to the hospital this morning. Emergency gallbladder surgery. Kevin was supposed to cover her docket, but he's not answering his phone. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Alicia's arraignment was in courtroom C, yes, Lisa confirmed, among about 20 other cases. She ran a hand through her hair in frustration. We're trying to find another judge who can step in, but everyone's booked solid today. Court clerk Barbara Lewis appeared at the door, slightly breathless. There you are, Lisa. We have a situation. She stopped abruptly when she saw me. Oh, Judge Walker. Thank goodness. We need your help. My help? Judge Reeves is out for emergency surgery. Judge Morgan is unreachable, and we have a full arraignment docket starting. She checked her watch. In 15 minutes. You're the only judge in the building who isn't currently in court. Barbara, I said carefully, my cousin is on that docket. She's being arraigned for identity theft, using my identity. Barbara's eyes widened. Oh dear, that is a complication. Lisa interjected, we could delay the whole docket, but that means 20 people either wait all day or have to come back tomorrow. Some in custody. I thought quickly. Let me call Chief Judge Hernandez. This requires his guidance. Judge Hernandez picked up on the second ring. I explained the situation as concisely as possible, including the confrontation outside the courthouse and my obvious conflict of interest regarding Alicia's case. I see the dilemma, he said after a moment. Here's what we'll do. You can open court and handle the administrative aspects of starting the session. Explain that you have a conflict with one specific case and you'll recuse yourself for that matter only. I'll send Judge Patel from my chambers to handle your cousin's arraignment specifically. He was working on opinions today but can step in for one case. Thank you, sir. That seems like the best solution given the circumstances. One more thing, Shannon, he added before hanging up. Document everything about the incident outside. If your cousin made physical contact with you on courthouse grounds, that's a serious matter, regardless of your familial relationship. Yes, sir. Barbara was waiting anxiously when I hung up. Judge Hernandez says I should proceed with opening court and handle all cases except Alicia's. Judge Patel will come down specifically for that arraignment. Relief washed over her face. Perfect. Thank you, Judge Walker. I'll have your robes brought to the judicial chambers behind courtroom C immediately. 20 minutes later, I was adjusting my robes in the small chamber behind the courtroom. My cheek still showed a faint red mark from Alicia's malicious slap, but it wasn't immediately noticeable. I had pulled my hair back into a tight bun and put on the judicial face I had practiced, calm, impartial, dignified. When I entered the courtroom through the judge's entrance, the bailiff called out, "All rise. Court is now in session." The Honorable Judge Shannon Walker presiding. As I took my seat at the bench, I scanned the crowded courtroom. My heart nearly stopped when I spotted my father and Alicia in the gallery. Alicia's mouth fell open in shock. My father's face drained of color as he realized who was sitting in the judge's seat. I forced myself to look away from them and focus on the task at hand. Good morning, everyone. We have a full docket today, and I appreciate your patience. Before we begin, I need to make a brief statement. There is one case on today's docket where I have a personal conflict of interest and will be recusing myself. When we reach the matter of State versus Alicia Walker, Judge Patel will temporarily take the bench to handle that arraignment. For all other matters, we will proceed as normal. The court clerk handed me the docket, and I began calling cases in order. I handled each arraignment with careful attention, explaining the charges to defendants, confirming they understood their rights, addressing bail considerations, and setting dates for preliminary hearings. All the while, I was acutely aware of my father and Alicia watching me from the gallery. With each case I handled confidently and professionally, I could feel the weight of their gaze. For the first time, they were seeing me in my element. Respected. Authoritative. Confident. After nearly an hour, we reached Alicia's case. The court calls State versus Alicia Walker. Case number 2024 CR 789. I paused, meeting the collective gaze of the courtroom, including theirs. As previously stated, I am recusing myself from this matter due to a personal conflict. We will take a brief recess while Judge Patel assumes the bench. I stood and exited through the judge's door, passing Judge Patel in the hallway. Thank you for stepping in, Your Honor. He nodded. No problem, Shannon. Family cases are always complicated. I waited in my chambers while Judge Patel handled Alicia's arraignment. Through the door, I could hear the muffled sounds of proceedings. I resisted the urge to peek inside. Whatever happened now was out of my hands. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. Judge Patel entered, already removing his robe. All done, he said. She pleaded not guilty, but her attorney indicated they'll likely be working on a plea agreement. Given the evidence, that's probably wise. Thank you again for stepping in. Of course. He hesitated at the door. By the way, your father asked me where he could find you. I didn't give him any information, but I thought you should know he was asking. My heart skipped a beat. Thank you for the heads up. After Judge Patel left, I returned to the courtroom to finish the remaining cases on the docket. Alicia was gone, presumably taken back into custody or released on bail, but my father still sat in the gallery, watching me intently. For the next hour, I focused entirely on the cases before me, giving each defendant my full attention. With the final case concluded, I adjourned court and retreated to my chambers. I was hanging up my robe when a knock came at the door. Yes? I called, expecting Barbara or another staff member. The door opened slowly, and my father stood in the doorway, looking uncertain and somehow smaller than I remembered. May I come in? He asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I nodded, motioning to the chair across from my desk. For a long moment, we sat in silence. The roles of our relationship had suddenly and dramatically reversed. In this room, I was the authority figure. He was the visitor seeking audience. My father cleared his throat. So, a judge. Yes. You never told me. I raised an eyebrow. I tried to, Dad, many times over many years. You were always more interested in Alicia's latest job at the mall. He flinched at the brutal accuracy of the statement. I saw you today in court. You were impressive. Coming from him, it was perhaps the closest thing to praise I had ever received. I didn't know how to respond, so I simply said, thank you. Alicia was released on bail, he continued. Her lawyer seems to think she'll get a plea deal. Probation, restitution, community service. That sounds appropriate for a first offense, I said neutrally. Another long silence stretched between us. Finally, he said what he had clearly come to say. I'm sorry about what happened outside. She shouldn't have done that. No, she shouldn't have. And I should have stopped her, or said something. I looked directly at him. Yes, you should have. He held my gaze for a moment, then looked away. I've made a lot of mistakes, Shannon. With you. I see that now. It was an admission I had waited decades to hear, but it felt hollow, coming only after he had seen me in a position of power and authority. Had I remained a public defender, would this realization ever have come? Why did you always favor her over me? I asked, the question that had haunted me since childhood finally finding its voice. My father sighed heavily. She reminded me of myself. Struggling, making mistakes, needing second chances. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. Like your mother. His voice caught on the last word. After Elizabeth died, looking at you was painful. You have her eyes, her determination. So you punished me for reminding you of Mom and rewarded Alicia for being a mess? He winced. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. It was terrible, Dad. It was terrible to grow up feeling like I was doing something wrong by doing everything right. The conversation with my father in my chambers that day didn't magically repair 20 years of damage. There was no tearful embrace, no instant reconciliation. But it was a beginning. The first truly honest exchange we'd had since my mother died. I don't expect you to forgive me, he said as he prepared to leave. But I am proud of what you've accomplished, Shannon. Even if I've been terrible at showing it. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means something to hear it, even now. We agreed to meet for dinner the following month, a small step toward whatever our relationship might become. As he reached the door, he turned back. Your mother would have been so proud of you. She always said you would do remarkable things. After he left, I sat alone in my chambers, letting tears fall freely for the first time that day. They were complicated tears, grief for the relationship I had never truly had with my father, relief at the small breakthrough we just experienced, and a bittersweet pride in how far I had come despite everything. The weeks that followed brought significant developments. Alicia accepted a plea deal, agreeing to full restitution of the money she had fraudulently obtained using my identity, 2 years of probation, and community service. The prosecutor told me that during negotiations, Alicia had expressed genuine remorse, particularly about the courthouse incident. She asked if he would be willing to meet with her to apologize in person, Lisa told me over coffee. With her attorney present, of course. I considered the request carefully. Not yet. Maybe someday. But I'm not ready for that. My decision to maintain boundaries with Alicia was part of a larger commitment to my own well-being. For too long, I had allowed the hope of family approval to influence my emotions and choices. Now, I was prioritizing my own healing. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Martinez, who specialized in family trauma. Our weekly sessions helped me process not only the recent dramatic events, but the long-standing patterns that had shaped my life. You've been seeking validation from people who are fundamentally incapable of giving it, she observed during one session. That's not a reflection on your worth, but on their limitations. My support network proved invaluable during this period. Julia visited frequently, bringing home-cooked meals and providing the unconditional friendship that had sustained me for years. My colleagues on the bench checked in regularly, offering both professional guidance and personal support. Judge Thompson, my original mentor, took me to lunch shortly after news of the courthouse incident had circulated through legal circles. I heard you handled yourself with remarkable dignity, she said. Not everyone could maintain judicial composure after being assaulted by a family member. I didn't feel very dignified in the moment, I admitted. That's the secret of the robe, she said with a knowing smile. It's not about how you feel, it's about how you conduct yourself despite how you feel. 6 months after the courthouse confrontation, I met my father for dinner at a quiet restaurant halfway between our homes. These monthly meetings had become a tentative new tradition, each one slightly less awkward than the last. Alicia has been doing well in her therapy, he mentioned as we waited for dessert. She's holding down a job at the library, staying sober. That's good to hear, I said sincerely. While I wasn't ready to reconnect with Alicia, I didn't wish her ill. How are things with you? Better. He hesitated, then added, I've been seeing someone. A grief counselor. Should have done it 20 years ago after your mother died. This surprised me. My father had always dismissed therapy as paying strangers to listen to your problems. What changed your mind? I asked. You, he said simply. Seeing you that day in court, so composed, so strong, even after everything that happened, it made me realize how much I've missed by holding on to the past. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Too much water under the bridge for that. But it was honest in a way it had never been before. On the anniversary of my mother's death, I made a pilgrimage to her grave for the first time in years. I brought yellow roses, her favorite, and spent an hour sitting beside her headstone, telling her about my life, my achievements, my struggles. I wish you could have seen me take the bench, Mom, I whispered, tracing the letters of her name with my finger. But I felt you there somehow. One unexpected outcome of my personal journey was a new professional initiative. I started a mentoring program for young women from difficult family backgrounds who were interested in legal careers. Once a month, I invited high school and college students to the courthouse for workshops on law, professional development, and resilience. The law saved me, I told them during our first session. It gave me structure when my life lacked it, and purpose when I felt lost, and ultimately a way to create justice when I had experienced injustice. Watching these young women find their voices and strengths became one of the most rewarding aspects of my life. Many of them came from situations far more challenging than mine had been. Yet, they showed remarkable determination and courage. You're creating a legacy, Julia observed after sitting in on one of the workshops. Something that will outlast any family drama. She was right. While I couldn't change my past, I could absolutely shape my future and potentially influence the futures of others. The cycle of dysfunction that had defined my family for generations? It had stopped with me. As I approach my 33rd birthday, I can look back on the past 2 years with a sense of hard-won peace. The young woman who once desperately sought her father's approval has been replaced by someone who understands that true validation comes from within. I recently added a single family photo to my office. Not the staged portraits my father preferred, but a candid shot of my mother and me at the beach when I was about 9. We're both laughing, our hair wild from the wind. Genuine joy captured in a fleeting moment. It reminds me daily of where I came from and how far I've traveled. The journey of healing is rarely linear. There are still days when old wounds feel fresh, when a casual comment or memory triggers the pain of rejection. But those moments no longer define me or dictate my responses. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing harmful behavior. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. My cousin's attack at the courthouse door could have been just another painful chapter in our troubled family story. Instead, it became a turning point that ultimately led to greater understanding and peace. When she called me a filthy animal and my father stood by watching, I thought it was my lowest moment. I couldn't have imagined that minutes later, sitting in the judge's seat, I would begin the process of reclaiming my narrative and redefining my worth. We don't get to choose our families or the wounds they inflict. But we do get to choose how we respond to those wounds, whether we let them define us or use them as catalysts for growth. In taking the judge's seat that day, I wasn't just fulfilling a professional role. I was taking the seat of judgment in my own life, deciding what would hold weight and what would be dismissed. So tell me, have you ever had a moment when someone's attempt to humiliate you unexpectedly revealed your own strength? What did you do? I really want to know. Thank you for listening to my journey. Take care.